It's an honor to be here. I'd rather be sitting there, frankly, but I don't have that choice anymore. Thank you for your time. India in our constitution is defined as India, that is Bharat, a union of states. So these states, they have got together and formed India or Bharat. And the most important thing is that the voice of all the people who are included in these states is heard loud and clear, and no voice is crushed, intimidated, because I believe that India has an inherent wisdom, that it has a very long history, a long tradition. And my experience has been that regardless of whether people are poor or rich, they have a sense of what India should be doing and where it should be going. So to me, the first step is protecting that voice and making sure that the institutions, the structures that protect that voice are working and are defended. That's where the whole thing begins. And I state that because when we use words like democracy, what we are actually talking about is the voice of people. And listening effectively to that voice, allowing that voice expression is central to any success. And we've experienced that pretty much everything that we've achieved so far, whether it is our economic growth, our ability to manage our differences, the bedrock of it is this idea that we protect the voice of all our people. And our leader, Mahatma Gandhi, said it best when he said that the most important voice is the one that's last in the line. It's the most difficult voice to protect. And a nation that is doing that will succeed.
Wow. I was quite impressed by that answer and the link that you make to democracy. There is at the moment a big international gathering taking place in India. It's called the G20. So on which side is India in international relations? At the end of the day, this is also a place where we study international affairs, right? So on whose side is India?
There was a leader in India once, and they were asked, on whose side are you? Do you lean left or do you lean right? And she said, no, we stand straight in the middle. So I don't, when you're dealing with a country the size of India, we have to have relationships with multiple different countries. And I think it's a simplification to say, whose side are you on? The blunt answer to that is we are on our own side. And as a nation, we act in our interest. And we do whatever suits us with regards to our interest. I don't think, it's so black and white. Are you on this person's side or are you on that person's side? For a large country like ours, it becomes very difficult to come up with an answer for that. But we do have a strong view that voice and democracy are important. I'm sure many of my friends from India will understand this. This notion of, clear-cut black and white, this is not an Indian notion. Indian people, their basic architecture is designed to deal with much more complexity and much more nuance. So I don't necessarily buy the, you're either on this side or you're on this side. But I can see clearly that there is a problem, right? And that problem requires a solution. It's a global problem, and more than a global problem, it's a problem for India, it's a problem for Europe, and it's a problem for the United States. And frankly, it's a problem for all of you in this room, because you're going to have to deal with the problem. And the problem is that we have a planet today where the bulk of production, the bulk of manufacturing, the bulk of value addition is being done in China. And I'm not going to comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. The Chinese have successfully competed against us and achieved it, right? There is a problem with, in my view, there is a problem with the way they do it. They produce, they're very good at producing, they produce the phone in my pocket, they produce the camera, but they do it in non-democratic, coercive conditions. And the problem is that for us, we need to think about production in a democratic environment, production in a non-coercive environment, and we need to be able to compete with them. Meaning, they don't need to give their population political freedom. They can just give them economic freedom and then become the center of production globally. We have to produce and compete with them, and we have to give our people political freedom and economic freedom. So that is really the challenge. I don't see it as, a confrontation with China. China has placed on the table a way of working, a way of production. And I think it is important for the United States, for India, for Europe, to place an alternative system, an alternative method on the table. And I think we owe it to, certainly we owe it to our population, and I think the French and the Europeans owe it to their population, because we are not going to be able to manage our countries. We're not going to be able to give students like you jobs without doing that. So to me, it's an opportunity to say, can we produce in democratic structures, within democratic frameworks?
Lady over there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Lydia Jayakumar. I want to ask about the violence against minorities in India, in particular because this is close to my heart, violence, caste atrocities in India. Every day we hear, people from the Dalit community killed or violence against them because they went to a wedding, because they went to the school, because they, things that are our rights, just because we're, accessing it, there's violence against people in the Dalit community. What do you think needs to be done? Because it's societal, but it's also institutional. And it seems like there is no answer to it and there is no help from it. So.
No, I think it needs to be combated. I think it requires a political imagination. And I think it is very important that it is done. What the BJP and the RSS are trying to do, the heart of what they're trying to do, is trying to stop the expression, the participation of lower castes, other backward castes, tribals, and minority communities. And for me, in India, where a Dalit person or a Muslim person, tribal person, upper caste person, anybody is being mistreated, is being attacked, is not the India I want. So I think it's very important that this question is taken head on, but I don't think that the type of political imagination that is required is currently there. It ebbs and flows. So you have these movements, you have this expression, and then they ebb away. And I think we're at one of those points where they've sort of ebbed away, and we need to reconstruct the political imagination that will, solve the problem you're talking about. For me, this is the central problem in India. This is bigger than any other problem.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Hi, thank you for the conversation. My name is Tanishq Saha, and I guess I had a question related to a term you used earlier on in the speech, Bharat. And there is a lot of discussion going around social media right now with a potential renaming, rebranding, whatever you might call it. But does this kind of change of a more popular name? We all know India has been named Bharat since its inception, but is there a point or some value to be derived in changing this name in the international perspective, in the weight we can bring to discussions, to be on our own side as you speak?
Well, the Constitution actually uses both names, right? So the line in the Constitution is the line I started with. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. So I don't really see a problem there. Both words are perfectly acceptable. But I think maybe we irritated the government a little bit because we named our coalition India, so that got them all heated up. And now they've decided to change the name of the country. I mean, you know how these things are. I mean, we could always give our coalition a second name as well. So, I mean, I don't think it'll solve the purpose. But people act in strange ways. What do you think about it?
I personally believe it might not be the best thing to focus on right now, especially given that the country is at the lens, it's at the focus of this big summit that's taking place. World leaders are there to discuss so many different issues. I found that it could have been something that could be tabled for a later moment if it was necessary, and I don't know, focus about issues inside and other issues.
You're right, but there is something deeper that is going on, which is that people who want to change the name of anything are basically trying to deny history, right? The fact of the matter is, whether we like it or we don't like it, we have a history. We were ruled by the British. We fought the British. We defeated the British, right? I'm sure the English don't like it, but English is spoken by more Indians than English people. It's our language, more than theirs, right? And we speak it in our own way. We twist it and we turn it maybe in ways they don't like. So the English that is spoken in India is actually a different expression, right? That is spoken in England. Embedded in that English is a huge history, a lot of pain, a lot of happiness, imagination, struggle. Those things are embedded. And the people who want to change the name want to erase that. They don't want that the history of our country is known to our future generation. It disturbs them, right? I believe that we should accept our history. If we were ruled by the British for 100, 200 years, okay, we dealt with it, and let's move on. So it's a deeper question.
Thank you. We're going to go up there.
Hello, my name is Lydia Bilali. I am a student here at SciencesPo. And for the past 3 months, I've been interning as a research intern at the German Institute for Global and Area Studies on a project that focuses on the weaponization of anti-fake news laws in South and Southeast Asia. And I've been researching a lot of dozens and dozens of cases of journalists in India that have been targeted and silenced and punished by using the Indian Penal Code. So with this consideration, my question is double. So firstly, how can we continue justifying and saying that India is the largest and biggest democracy in the world? And two, what is the opposition doing to help these civil society members? Thank you.
I mean, I walked across the country 4,000 kilometers um, to raise some of these issues. What you're saying is absolutely correct. There is a tendency now to intimidate, to threaten, not just members of civil society. I have 24 cases on me. I've got a criminal defamation judgment against me. The first time in Indian history that somebody has been given the maximum sentence for criminal defamation. Very convenient that I needed the exact number of days that they gave me to be disqualified. So we are dealing with this issue. The democratic expression is deeply embedded in India. And the fight to keep the democratic structure of India alive is ongoing and very vibrant. We are part of that fight. Now, when that fight is over, if that fight is over, and the other side wins, then I would agree with you. But that has not happened yet, and I do not think it's going to happen. We are going through a process. We are going through turbulence in our democratic structure, and there are millions of people, I'm sure many, many youngsters in this room, who really believe in that democratic structure and are going to defend it with everything that they've got. So it's a fight, and I think it's also an opportunity to rethink and to reimagine our country. There are many things that can do with improvement. And I think this is an opportunity, this is a test that many countries go through. And I think we'll come out just fine in this test.
Gentleman up.
Hi there, yes. So I am a master in social policy here at SciencesPo. While it might not quite look it, I'm actually also part Indian. And over this past few years, it's been particularly scary to see many of my friends and family members back in India become radicalized by Hindu nationalist rhetoric. My question to you is, if your coalition gets elected, where exactly do you see yourself placing the role of Hinduism in a post-BJP India? And how concretely do you propose dismantling or perhaps even transforming the legacy of a religious zeitgeist which has captured the hearts and minds of so many Indians today?
Look, I've read the Gita, I've read a number of the Upanishads, I've read many Hindu books. There's nothing Hindu about what the BJP does. There's absolutely nothing Hindu about what they do. Right? I have not read anywhere, in no Hindu book, from no learned Hindu person, have I ever heard that you should terrorize, harm people who are weaker than you. I've never read this. So this idea, this word, Hindu nationalists, this is a wrong word. They're not Hindu nationalists. They are nothing to do with Hinduism. They are out to get power at any cost, and they will do anything to get power, and they will do anything to ensure that the Indian caste structure, the social structure of my country is not threatened. They want dominance of a few people, and that is what they're about. There is nothing Hindu about them.
Thank you. Very clear. Gentlemen.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Zaid Wahidi. I'm a lawyer based in Paris. My question is about the opposition's narrative for the next election. And I saw that Ms. Sonia Gandhi wrote a letter identifying 9 points to the Prime Minister. Is that the opposition's pitch? Because as a minority, of course, it's important for me to have the Pyar Ki Dukaan in a Nafrat Ka Bazaar. But is there another issue, or are there certain issues that you have identified that will perhaps build more consensus with even the majority community and get you where you are, where you want to be in 2024?
When you see the people on the stage in the India coalition, you must realize that more people from the majority community vote for us than vote for the BJP. 60% of India votes for us. 40% of India votes for them, right? So this idea that the majority community is voting for the BJP, this is a wrong idea. The majority community actually votes more for us than they vote for them, right? They do polarize society. They divide society. They spread hatred in society. And that is their mechanism. They also happen to have very good relationships with the most powerful, richest crony capitalists in the land, who finance them, support them, help them do what they do. And so this is the architecture that stands behind the BJP. The idea that Mr. Narendra Modi is orchestrating this thing is a gross simplification. Mr. Narendra Modi is an instrument of the architecture. And I'm pretty confident that the RSS can get rid of Narendra Modi in 5 minutes if they want to, right? It is a structure that is doing this. And that structure is now a threat to Indian democracy. So we are committed to fighting that structure. What are the broader elements? The first thing is the gross inequality that is taking place in India, right? Few business people who are billionaires. The third richest person on the planet was Indian, and 90% of India going back into poverty, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have to solve what I was talking about earlier. We keep talking about economic growth. You read the newspapers about economic growth, right? Have you ever read in the newspaper next to the economic growth question the employment question? Has anybody in the newspaper said, wait a minute, we are growing at 7%, 8%, but we have the highest unemployment rate in 40 years? That's a much more interesting question to me, because we can grow at 9% and give none of you jobs, right? That's what's happening, right? So that's the second big question. And the third question that is very close to my heart is the large mass, the real power of India is in the lower castes, the other backward castes, these communities. And they are not given any space in the governance of India. They're not given any space in corporate India. They're not given any space anywhere. And that to me is a crime. So those would be the central thrusts of how we would think about it. The final thing I would say is that one way to look at India is that it is making a transition from rural to urban. And the largest migration of people from rural to urban in human history ever is taking place in India and China, right? And if we're going to be making this transition, this is a frightening transition for a lot of people. So we need to give them the basic minimum architecture to make this transition safely. What does that mean? That we spend a serious amount of money on education. We spend a serious amount of money on healthcare. That government does not abrogate responsibility for healthcare and education. And that we provide a minimum floor where India commits to all its people that no matter what happens, you can simply not go below that floor. We will give you a minimum income below which no matter what happens, you're not going to go. But, when I talk to students, especially the Indian students here, and the students who are not from India, the injustice that the caste system in India does, the pain and trauma that the caste system in India causes is beyond anything I know anywhere else in the world. And so I see my politics as challenging the idea that there should be this caste order in India, that there should be this permanent hierarchy in India, and that some people, should have access to all the institutions, all the structures, and other people should just live a life of poverty and misery. So this would be the framework that the Indian coalition would be talking about and thinking about.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Thank you, ma'am.
And by the way, when I said minimum floor, I didn't only mean financial floor. So I think the idea that 200 million people can feel uncomfortable in India today, or Sikhs can feel uncomfortable in India today, I think that is a matter of shame for us. And I think that needs to be corrected. And there are minorities who feel that way. There are lower caste people who feel that way. There are women who feel that way. And so we are very strongly committed to this.
Good evening, Mr. Gandhi. My name is Prati Bhatt, and I'm a master's student from Social Policy and Social Innovation. As you already have answered partly my questions, I would try to keep it short. The place in Delhi which is being, where people are being mobilized in lieu of G20 is Badarpur, where you plan to go.
The slum.
G20.
Yeah, okay. Where they've been, there's slum.
Yeah. You plan to go there, so I'm just like letting you know the name of the place.
They'll be very annoyed with you, by the way.
It's okay. It's okay. In all honesty and humility, I wish to ask you if there is a defined secularism or a future of defined secularism in the country. If the party comes to power in the next elections, how do you specifically counter the hate and the chest thumping that has happened in the past few years regarding religion and education? And you can choose to answer whichever.
You know, the literally, if the Prime Minister tomorrow morning was to decide there would be no chest thumping and no violence in India, it would stop. It is the direction that the leadership of the country gives, the imagination that the leadership of a country gives, that shapes people. The feeling right now is that you can do whatever you want and nothing's going to happen to you, right? The moment the feeling becomes that there are going to be consequences to attacking someone, consequences to beating up someone, that behavior will change instantly, I guarantee you, right? That doesn't resolve the earlier question about institutions, which is this sort of disease that has now entered the Indian institutional framework, where the neutrality of those institutions has gone out of the window. And I think there, frankly, we will have to make examples of people. We'll have to make sure that some of the people who have done what they have done pay a significant price for what they've done, so that anybody who's thinking about doing it again understands that they will also pay the price for attacking the soul of India. Because that is how I see it. This is an attack on the soul of India, and the people doing this should pay a price for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question goes to the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Arman. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So my question, I attended one of your speeches at the Bharat Jodo Yatra, and I remember when you mentioned crony capitalism, the crowd went wild. They were all like Adani. And so there's this feeling clearly on the ground that this kind of top-down development is happening, right, in India, economic development, where there is crony capitalism, like you said. And my question is, if we are to decentralize power, where the state is less involved in all affairs, economic affairs, etc., how would you or how would your coalition ensure that the concentration of wealth does not take place in a few corporations?
By the way, just because you have decentralization of power doesn't mean the state is less involved. The state is just involved at a different level, right? But The state is still involved. The center is not involved. So for example, if you go to Kerala, I'll give you an example. I'm the member of Parliament of Kerala. If I want to take any decision in my constituency, I have to speak to the local body people. I can't just as a member of Parliament suddenly say, I now am deciding to do this. They'll come to me and say, how did you do that? You have to have a conversation with us. So it roots you very quickly because they can charge me a price. They can send me the bill, right? So decentralization does not mean that that the state is walking away. The state is just coming at in a different level, right? So what was the second part of your question?
So how would you ensure that, I mean, monopolies don't happen in India?
Look, what you're having in India today with Mr. Adani is so blatant and it's completely so over the top, right? I don't think there's any other place where this is going on. The gentleman is in, pretty much every single business, right? As people know, he's manipulating, he's sending money out of India. He's manipulating his stock price. He's using that money to buy Indian assets. It's a big circle, and part of the reason the Prime Minister suddenly got so excited about this Bharat issue is because of the Adani story. Everybody knows it, we know it, that there are very close linkages between the Prime Minister and Mr. Adani. The documentation is available, right? And he's not going to get away with it. Eventually, he's going to be held accountable for it. So it is so over the top that it's completely ridiculous. However, you can have policy structures that seriously affect how you distribute income. I'll give you an example. The GST, right, is a tax on small and medium businesses. Small and medium business has to hire an accountant, has to go through a whole process, which costs him relatively much more than it costs Mr. Adani, right? Demonetization is an assault on small businesses. Demonetization wasn't about black money. It was about breaking the back of small and medium businesses in India to pave the way for an Adani. So how you define policy and how you think about policy, where you put money, fundamentally determines how you distribute it, right? So those things are not difficult to do. Manrega, do you think Manrega distributes wealth? Hugely. Right to food distributes wealth. Supporting small and medium businesses distributes wealth. Developing skills distributes wealth. Destroying small and medium businesses concentrates wealth. GST applied the way it is concentrates wealth. What you did during COVID concentrates wealth. Giving a free pass to every large business guy and forgiving their loans and not forgiving the loans of farmers concentrates wealth. So what you do is very clear. It's not complicated. And we have a history of doing it.
Can I have the last
So
question,
as we're coming to an end,
Can I have last
I
question?
wanted to see if you had a recommendation or a parting message for these students. At the end of the day, you're the chairman.
This is quite an unfair process here because I've been asked, I don't know how many questions, and I'm not allowed to ask even one question.
But that's the nature of the game.
So I would quite like to know from the students here. I mean, I didn't study in Paris. I studied in the US and in England. What is it like to study here? No, but I'm going for dinner this evening, I believe. You can come with us for dinner this evening.
I would really ask you now to give a huge applause to our guest speaker,